My junior developer David spent $12,000 of his own money buying team lunches because he didn't want anyone to feel as excluded as he did growing up poor. When his card declined in front of everyone, and our senior dev Marcus humiliated him, I called Marcus a LinkedIn influencer wannabe in front of the whole team. The next day, Marcus started a systematic campaign to destroy my career by spoofing my emails to clients and sabotaging our codebase, so I set up a honeypot trap that recorded him committing corporate espionage. My job was like a safe haven for corporate sharks. You see, I managed a successful tech startup in Manhattan, which meant team lunches made up our entire office culture. Almost 90% of my employees were full-blown elitists. Designer suits, Rolex watches, never brought their own lunch. So one day when I saw 15 people heading to the conference room, I was already rolling my eyes. One of my newer hires, David, came up to me and I assumed it was to complain about his workload, as if I had any control over client demands. Instead, he smiled at me in a way that I knew he was different. He told me he'd cover the team lunch order on his card. This was weird because it wasn't even his project celebration, but I let it slide. None of the team, not even the project manager whose success it was, thanked him. But the whole time David was smiling, as if it really was his pleasure. He ended up ordering premium meals for everyone, and even stayed late to clean up the conference room, and I thought it was a one-time thing, until 2 days later, that is. He did the same thing again, except this time he came early, and even helped to set up all the lunch boxes and drinks, ordered from that $40 per plate sushi place. But this time, the team started berating him, not outright, but in the passive-aggressive way that only tech bros know how to do. I heard as they said things like, "It must be nice to have all that trust fund money," or, "If you really wanted to impress us, you could have gotten us into 11 Madison Park." Everything in me wanted to pull him aside and tell him that he didn't need to buy their respect. Unfortunately, this goes against maintaining professional distance, so instead I just documented every instance in my management notes. A month later, he was at it again, but before I could say anything, he slammed a huge stack of receipts down on my desk during our one-on-one. Inside was a folder of every team member's dietary restrictions, favorite restaurants, and their preferred lunch times. I just stared at him, wondering what the hell drove him to this point, but this time, his card declined, right there on the delivery app. I saw tears welling up in his eyes, and I gently closed my office door. I don't know what I was expecting, but he completely broke down and told me everything. How everyone always expected him to organize the team socials while never including him in after-work drinks. He was even paying for coffee runs for half the floor because he's going anyway. Turns out, he didn't even make more than the other juniors. He just didn't want anyone to feel as excluded as he did growing up poor. And now that his roommate had bailed on rent, he couldn't afford to play the role anymore. My heart broke. He kept apologizing for crying, but I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. Suddenly, he pulled out this envelope from his backpack that said student loans on it and started counting out 20s. I stopped him right there and said the company would cover it this time. When we walked back out, the team was all huddled together whispering. Marcus, the senior dev with his perfectly styled hair, looked right at David and said, "We were just discussing how the lunch quality has been declining lately." He said it with this fake concern while looking David up and down. The card declined again the next week. This time it was in front of everyone. Marcus stepped forward with his black Amex and made a big show of it. "David, maybe you should focus on managing your finances before trying to be everyone's hero. It's embarrassing for the whole team." David excused himself to the bathroom. When he came back, his eyes were puffy and red. The team completely ignored him and demanded that he pull himself together for the client call. When David actually started to splash water on his face at his desk, something in me snapped. HR was in an off-site that day, so I knew I could say whatever I wanted. I walked over to the open floor plan and tapped my coffee mug until everyone paid attention. "Marcus, I've been tracking these lunch expenses for a year now. How much have you spent altogether?" There was silence. His mouth was wide open, completely stunned that I knew his name. "Well, let me tell you, probably around $20 on your own birthday cake." My tone was bright and professional. I continued. "David has spent over $12,000 on team lunches, and I just wanted to let you know that every time you guys submit peer reviews, the leadership team sees right through your bullshit, especially yours." I then pointed right at Marcus. "You look like a LinkedIn influencer wannabe. Maybe if you spent half as much time on your code reviews as you do on your Medium articles, you might actually deserve that senior title." The other devs started shifting uncomfortably. The junior employees had all stopped typing and were staring wide-eyed at the drama. Marcus grabbed his laptop backpack and stormed out. I was over the moon, and as an added bonus, I immediately submitted David's promotion paperwork with a 40% raise. But little did I know, Marcus wouldn't let me get away so easily, and it wasn't long before he taught me exactly what secrets tech bros are hiding. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find my parking spot taken. Not a huge deal, except it was the spot I'd been using for 3 years, right next to the elevator. The security guard shrugged when I asked about it, mumbling something about new assignments. I parked 3 blocks away and walked through the rain. When I finally made it to my desk, my computer wouldn't log in. The IT support ticket I submitted got marked as low priority, even though I selected urgent. I borrowed a laptop from the conference room and noticed several team members whispering near the coffee machine. They scattered when I approached. David wasn't at his desk. His promotion paperwork sat unsigned on my desk where I'd left it yesterday, but now it had coffee stains across the salary adjustment section. The backup copy I'd saved to the shared drive showed as file not found when I tried to access it. During the morning stand-up, 3 developers claimed they couldn't access the project repository I managed. Marcus had apparently restructured the permissions yesterday evening before leaving. The email trail showed he'd gotten verbal approval from someone in leadership, though nobody could remember who. I spent 2 hours fixing access issues while client emails piled up. When I finally opened my inbox, the top message was from our biggest client, forwarding a concerning email they'd received. Someone had sent them our internal project timeline showing we were behind schedule, except the dates had been altered to make it look worse than reality. The email came from a generic company address that IT claimed didn't exist in our system, but the writing style, with its perfectly crafted passive-aggressive tone and unnecessary semicolons, felt familiar. David returned after lunch looking exhausted. He'd been called into an optional training session that morning, which turned out to be a financial wellness seminar. The presenter had used anonymous examples of employees living beyond their means that sounded suspiciously specific to his situation. situation. I tried calling HR about the promotion paperwork, but they were still at the offsite. The backup contact said all promotions were frozen, pending a department review that had just been announced. Nobody in leadership seemed to know who had initiated it. That afternoon, our project management tool crashed during a client demo. The backup presenter fumbled through outdated slides while I frantically tried to restore access. Marcus appeared in the Zoom call sidebar as a participant, even though he wasn't supposed to be on the project. His camera stayed off, but I could see he was actively viewing the screen. The client asked pointed questions about team stability and whether we had the resources to deliver. Someone had clearly planted doubts. We salvaged the meeting, but barely. After everyone left, I stayed late reviewing security logs. Marcus's badge had accessed the building at 5 a.m. that morning, 2 hours before his usual time. The printer logs showed he'd made copies of something from my personal drive, though the file names were encrypted. I found David in the break room the next day, staring at his phone. His roommate situation had gotten worse, and now his car payment was due. The raise I'd promised would have covered everything, but with promotions frozen, he was stuck. He mentioned that Marcus had offered to help with budgeting advice, which felt like salt in the wound. The team dynamics shifted subtly. People stopped making eye contact with me in meetings. My suggestions got tabled for further discussion more often. Even the office manager seemed colder, forgetting to order my usual coffee pods for the third week straight. I documented everything meticulously, the way I always had. But when I went to access my management notes, several entries were corrupted. The IT ticket for that issue also got marked low priority. Marcus returned to the office 3 days later like nothing had happened. He wore a new watch that probably cost more than David's monthly rent and made sure everyone noticed it. During the all-hands meeting, he presented a process improvement plan that essentially reversed every decision I'd made in the last quarter. The other managers nodded along, impressed by his initiative. When I pointed out the flaws in his logic, he smiled and said we could take it offline to discuss further. The CEO, who usually backed my calls, seemed distracted and ended the meeting early. I overheard 2 junior developers discussing whether I was losing my edge while waiting for the elevator. They stopped talking when they saw me, but the damage was done. The doubt was spreading. David's desk got moved to the far corner of the office, supposedly for better natural light. It happened to be right next to the server room, where the constant humming made phone calls impossible. His client interactions suffered, and I watched him struggle through video calls with the background noise. The coffee fund that David had been managing mysteriously came up short. Marcus suggested a full audit, volunteering to lead it personally. The investigation would require going through months of receipts, including all those lunch orders David had placed. I tried to protect David from the worst of it, but my own influence was waning. Meeting invites started arriving late or not at all. My input on hiring decisions got overlooked. The weekly leadership sync somehow got rescheduled to a time when I had a standing client call. The breaking point came when our biggest project hit a critical bug. The code review history showed I'd approved the problematic commit, except I'd been in a dentist appointment at that timestamp. Marcus heroically stepped in to fix it, earning praise from the CEO for his quick thinking. I knew then that this was just the beginning. Marcus wasn't just retaliating. He was systematically dismantling everything I'd built, and he was doing it with the kind of calculated precision that only someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of corporate manipulation could manage. David found me in my office that evening, holding a resignation letter. His hands shook as he explained he couldn't take it anymore. The financial pressure, the isolation, the constant subtle jabs, it was destroying him. I convinced him to give me one more week, though I wasn't sure what I could do. As I walked to my car that night, I found a printed screenshot under my windshield wiper. It was from Marcus's LinkedIn, a draft post about maintaining team morale during leadership transitions. The message was clear. The way Marcus works is really smart in a scary way. He's not just being mean directly. He's making tiny changes that add up to destroy everything. The coffee stains on David's papers, the moved desk near the loud servers, the meeting times that don't work. Each thing seems small, but together they break people down. But Marcus had made one mistake. He'd underestimated how much I'd learned from documenting every interaction for the past 3 years, and he definitely didn't know about the backup system I'd created after our last security breach. The game was just beginning, and I finally understood the rules. I spent that weekend digging through my backup drives, piecing together patterns I'd missed while they were happening. Marcus had been building his power base for months, cultivating relationships with key stakeholders, while I focused on day-to-day management. The evidence painted a clear picture of calculated moves designed to undermine my authority. Monday morning brought fresh chaos. The entire development team received an email about mandatory pair programming sessions, supposedly from me. I hadn't sent it. The new system paired junior developers with seniors in ways that maximized friction and slowed productivity. David got assigned to work with Marcus's closest ally, a developer known for his condescending teaching style. I confronted IT about the fake email, but they claimed it came from my authenticated account. The logs showed my IP address and correct timestamps, even though I'd been at my daughter's soccer game when it was sent. Someone had cloned my digital footprint perfectly. The client complaints escalated. 3 separate accounts reported receiving unprofessional responses to their support tickets, all traced back to our team. The responses used technical jargon to essentially tell clients their problems were their own fault. Each message came from different team members who swore they never sent them. I called an emergency team meeting to address the issues. Half the developers showed up late, claiming they received a different meeting time. Marcus arrived exactly on time with a concerned expression, offering to help coordinate better communication going forward. The CEO happened to walk by during the chaos, shaking his head at the disorganization. David's financial situation worsened when his direct deposit mysteriously failed. Payroll blamed a glitch in the system that only affected his account. They promised to cut a physical check, but it would take 5 business days. I offered to loan him money from my personal account, but he refused, too proud despite his desperation. The project repository corruption spread. Critical code segments disappeared overnight, setting our main client deliverable back by weeks. The version control system showed my credentials making the deletions, always at times when I had rock-solid alibis. But explaining that to angry clients proved nearly impossible. Marcus started hosting informal optimization sessions that I wasn't invited to. Team members emerged from these meetings with new ideas about process improvements that directly contradicted established protocols. When I pushed back, they questioned whether I was resistant to change and innovation. I discovered Marcus had been meeting with our biggest client's technical lead for coffee every week. The meetings weren't documented anywhere, but I spotted them through the window of the coffee shop across the street during my lunch break. Their body language suggested more than casual conversation. The performance review system suddenly required peer feedback for all management assessments. The timing felt deliberate, coming right when team morale had been poisoned against me. I watched team members huddle together, no doubt comparing notes on their feedback. David's desk situation deteriorated further. The facilities team claimed they needed to run new cables through his area, requiring him to relocate temporarily. His temporary spot ended up being a folding table in the break room, making any serious work impossible. He tried using conference rooms, but they were mysteriously always booked. I attempted to schedule one-on-ones with team members to address concerns directly. Every slot I proposed conflicted with sudden, critical meetings they couldn't miss. Even my most loyal developers seemed nervous about being seen talking to me privately. The CEO called me in for a discussion about team productivity metrics. The numbers looked terrible, showing a 40% drop in output over the past month. He mentioned that Marcus had shared some ideas about restructuring the team for better efficiency. I tried explaining the sabotage, but without concrete proof, it sounded like excuse making. Our code base suffered another hit when someone pushed experimental changes directly to production, bypassing all review processes. The site went down for 3 hours during peak usage. The commit history showed my approval on changes I'd never seen. Marcus volunteered to lead the emergency response team, further cementing his image as the competent problem solver. I started arriving at the office at 5 a.m. to get ahead of whatever daily crisis awaited. One morning, I found my desk drawers had been rifled through. Nothing seemed missing, but personal items had been moved. Security footage for that time period was conveniently corrupted. David's breaking point approached when his car got towed from the company lot. Apparently, his parking pass had been revoked due to non-payment, even though the fee came directly from payroll deductions. The towing fee would cost him a week's worth of groceries. The client I'd caught Marcus meeting with suddenly requested a team restructuring, specifically asking for Marcus to lead their account. They cited communication issues and missed deadlines, all problems that had mysteriously appeared in the past month. The CEO seemed inclined to agree. I discovered Marcus had been accessing the building after hours using a security override that shouldn't have been possible with his clearance level. When I reported this to security, they claimed his access had been upgraded due to his new responsibilities. No one could tell me what new responsibilities those were. Team meetings became exercises in subtle hostility. Developers questioned every decision I made, always with Marcus nodding thoughtfully in the background. He never directly challenged me, instead letting others do the dirty work while he maintained plausible deniability. The coffee fund audit Marcus initiated turned into a full investigation. He claimed to have found discrepancies totaling several $1,000s, all coincidentally during periods when David had managed the fund. The evidence looked damning on the surface, though I knew David had been scrupulously honest. I tried accessing my backup system from home, only to find my remote access had been revoked. It claimed it was a security measure affecting all management, but I noticed other managers still logging in remotely. My protests fell on deaf ears. David started job hunting openly, not even trying to hide his resume updates during work hours. I couldn't blame him. The daily humiliations had worn him down to nothing. He mentioned that Marcus had offered to write him a recommendation letter, the final insult added to injury. The CEO announced a department reorganization focused on agile leadership and distributed responsibility. The plan looked suspiciously similar to the structure Marcus had been advocating in his optimization sessions. My role would be evolved to focus on strategic initiatives rather than direct team management. I found evidence that Marcus had been manipulating our sprint planning software, artificially inflating task complexity for projects under my oversight while understating his own team's work. The data made it look like I consistently underestimated project timelines while he delivered ahead of schedule. During a client presentation, my laptop suddenly displayed personal emails instead of the slide deck. The emails, taken out of context, made me look unprofessional. I managed to recover, but the client's confidence had visibly shaken. Marcus smoothly stepped in to salvage the presentation. The IT department finally responded to my security concerns by launching a full audit of system access. Conveniently, the audit focused on potential security breaches from management accounts, with mine being the primary focus. Every anomaly from the past month got attributed to my credentials. David's promotion paperwork disappeared entirely from the system. HR claimed they had no record of it being submitted, despite my confirmation emails. When I tried to resubmit, I discovered I no longer had the authority to propose promotions without senior leadership approval. Team morale sessions started appearing on the calendar, mandatory for all staff. The sessions, led by an external consultant who happened to be Marcus's former colleague, focused on rebuilding trust after leadership failures. The implications weren't subtle. I caught Marcus in the server room after hours, but he had a ready explanation about urgent maintenance. Security backed his story, even though I'd seen him near the backup systems I'd been locked out of. My accusations started sounding increasingly paranoid to anyone who would listen. The final straw came when our biggest client formally requested a change in account leadership. They cited a series of communication failures and missed expectations, all carefully documented in emails I'd supposedly sent. The CEO called an emergency meeting to discuss the transition, but I'd spent 3 years documenting everything, and my personal backup system remained untouched. While Marcus focused on the company systems, he'd overlooked the encrypted drives I kept at home. Every interaction, every suspicious access log, every pattern of behavior was preserved. I compiled the evidence methodically, creating a timeline that showed the systematic nature of the sabotage. The patterns were too consistent to be coincidence. The technical knowledge required too specific to be anyone but Marcus. But I needed more than data. I needed him to overplay his hand. I planted subtle bait in the system, false information about a critical client deliverable that only Marcus would know to exploit. Then I waited, documenting every access, every change, every digital fingerprint he left behind. The trap worked better than expected. Marcus, confident in his control, made increasingly bold moves. He accessed systems beyond his authorization, left traceable edits in code repositories, and created a digital trail that led directly back to him. During the emergency meeting about the account transition, I presented my evidence. The CEO's expression shifted from skepticism to concern concern as the pattern became undeniable. Other team members started connecting dots, realizing how they'd been manipulated. Marcus tried to deflect, claiming I was fabricating evidence to cover my own failures, but the technical audit supported my data. His access patterns, the timing of system changes, the correlation with client complaints, it all painted a clear picture of deliberate sabotage. The room turned against him as developers realized how they'd been used. The junior employees who'd looked up to him seemed especially betrayed. David, who'd been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up about the systematic harassment he'd endured. Security escorted Marcus from the building while HR began the termination process. The damage he'd caused would take months to fully repair, but the truth was finally exposed. His carefully constructed image crumbled as word spread through the tech community. I reinstated David's promotion immediately, with back pay for the delay. The team slowly began to rebuild trust, acknowledging how easily they'd been turned against each other. The client, once informed of the sabotage, agreed to continue with our team. Marcus's LinkedIn post about leadership transitions never got published. Instead, his profile quietly disappeared, along with his Medium articles about optimization and efficiency. OP is definitely plotting some crazy shit right now. The part where David speaks up after staying quiet really shows the impact of standing up at the right moment with the right proof. The tech bro network that had seemed so powerful proved fragile when faced with documented evidence of unethical behavior. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn with a plan. My personal backup drives contained 3 years of meticulous documentation, but I needed Marcus to create fresh evidence of his sabotage. I set up a honeypot in our development environment, a fake critical update for our biggest client system that would be irresistible to someone trying to undermine me. I embedded tracking code that would log every access attempt, keystroke, and modification. Then I sent an email to the team about the urgent update, emphasizing that only I had authorization to deploy it. The trap was set. By 7 a.m., the first bite came through. Someone accessed the fake update using credentials that traced back to a VPN, but the access patterns matched Marcus's typical workflow perfectly. He modified the code to introduce subtle bugs that would manifest days later, making it look like poor quality control on my part. David arrived early, looking haggard. His car situation had forced him to take public transit, adding an hour to his commute. I handed him a company credit card and told him to use it for transportation until we sorted out his promotion. His eyes widened, but he accepted it without argument. The morning stand-up revealed new chaos. 3 team members reported that their development environments had been mysteriously reset overnight, losing days of work. The backup system showed the deletions happening at 3 a.m., supposedly from my account. But this time, I had proof I was home, thanks to my home security system that logged my presence. I noticed Marcus watching me carefully during the meeting, gauging my reaction. I kept my expression neutral while documenting everything on my phone. His confidence was growing, making him sloppy. The CEO called an impromptu all-hands meeting to discuss the department restructuring. Marcus had prepared a presentation showcasing his vision for the team, complete with metrics that painted my management style as outdated, but he'd made a critical error. His data included information from private performance reviews that only managers could access. I let him present without interruption, taking screenshots of every slide. When he finished, other managers started asking how he'd obtained confidential employee data. Marcus smoothly deflected, claiming it was anonymized public information, but I could see doubt creeping into their expressions. After the meeting, I found David in the break room looking at apartment listings on his phone. The prices made him close his eyes in frustration. I mentioned that the company had emergency housing assistance for employees in crisis, a program most people didn't know existed. His relief was palpable. The honeypot trap continued collecting data. Marcus accessed it 6 more times throughout the day, each time adding more malicious code. He even attempted to create a backdoor that would give him permanent access to client systems. His arrogance was documenting his own downfall. I scheduled a meeting with the CEO for the next morning, requesting our head of security attend as well. Then I spent the afternoon creating a comprehensive report that connected every incident from the past month to Marcus's digital fingerprints. The evidence was overwhelming when laid out chronologically. That evening, Marcus made his boldest move yet. He sent an email to our biggest client from a spoofed address that looked like mine, informing them that we were dropping their account due to internal restructuring. The client called me directly, confused and angry. I assured them it was a misunderstanding and forwarded the suspicious email to our security team. The next morning's meeting with the CEO started with skepticism. He'd known Marcus for years and found it hard to believe the accusations. But as I walked through the evidence, showing access logs, code modifications, and the sophisticated spoofing techniques, his expression grew increasingly serious. The head of security confirmed that the patterns I'd identified were consistent with insider sabotage. The honeypot trap had captured Marcus attempting to deploy malicious code that would have cost us millions in damages and destroyed our reputation. The CEO's face went pale. We called Marcus in immediately. He entered the office with his usual confidence, but it evaporated when he saw the security head present. I laid out the evidence methodically, showing each instance of sabotage with corresponding timestamps and digital signatures. Marcus tried to deny everything, claiming I was framing him out of jealousy. But when we showed him the honeypot logs with his unique coding patterns and access times, he fell silent. The security head informed him that his actions constituted corporate espionage and breach of contract. The CEO gave Marcus 2 options: resign immediately with no severance and a permanent ban from the premises, or face legal action that would destroy his career. Marcus chose resignation, his hands shaking as he signed the papers. Security escorted him out while he muttered about unfair treatment. Word spread through the office quickly. Team members who had been manipulated by Marcus approached me throughout the day, apologizing for their behavior. They shared stories of how he twisted their words, planted doubts, and created artificial conflicts. The full scope of his manipulation became clear. I called an emergency team meeting that afternoon. Without going into legal details, I explained that we'd identified and resolved the source of our recent technical issues. The relief in the room was tangible. Developers who hadn't spoken to each other in weeks started collaborating again. David's promotion paperwork was resubmitted and fast-tracked. HR approved it within hours, including the back pay for the delays. When I told him, he actually smiled for the first time in weeks. The raise would cover his new apartment deposit and eliminate his immediate financial crisis. The client we'd almost lost requested a meeting to discuss the security breach. I presented our findings and the immediate actions we'd taken. They were impressed by our quick response and transparent communication. Not only did they maintain their contract, but they increased their service agreement. Over the next week, we rebuilt our damaged systems. The team worked together better than they had in months, united by their shared experience of manipulation. The passive-aggressive culture that had festered under Marcus's influence began to dissolve. David moved to a desk with a window view, finally getting the workspace he deserved. Other team members started including him in lunch plans and after-work activities. The transformation was remarkable when the toxic influence was removed. I implemented new security protocols to prevent future insider attacks. Every access to sensitive systems now required multi-factor authentication and left detailed audit trails. The team understood these weren't restrictions, but protections against future sabotage. The coffee fund audit that Marcus had initiated was quietly closed. When we reviewed the actual records, David's management had been impeccable. He'd actually saved the company money through bulk ordering and vendor negotiations. I made sure this was noted in his performance review. 3 weeks after Marcus's departure, our team productivity metrics had returned to normal levels. The CEO acknowledged my handling of the crisis in the quarterly review, noting that my documentation practices had saved the company from potential disaster. My position was more secure than ever. The IT department restored all my system access and apologized for the delays in addressing my security concerns. They implemented new procedures for investigating suspicious activity, ensuring that future incidents would be caught faster. The head of IT personally guaranteed that my concerns would never be marked low priority again. David thrived in his new role, bringing fresh ideas and positive energy to the team. His financial stability allowed him to focus on work instead of survival. He even started a mentorship program for other junior developers, ensuring they wouldn't face the isolation he'd experienced. The department restructuring plan was shelved indefinitely. The CEO recognized that our existing structure worked well when not being actively sabotaged. My role remained unchanged, with full authority over my team and projects. Marcus's LinkedIn profile remained inactive. Through industry contacts, I heard he'd struggled to find new employment. Word had spread about his termination, and tech companies were wary of hiring someone with a history of corporate sabotage. His carefully cultivated network had abandoned him. Our team culture transformed completely. The elitist attitudes softened as developers recognized how easily they'd been manipulated into treating colleagues poorly. Team lunches became genuinely collaborative events, with everyone contributing and no one expected to carry the financial burden. I updated my backup systems with even more sophisticated tracking and encryption. The experience had taught me that documentation wasn't just about performance management. It was about protecting yourself and your team from those who would exploit corporate structures for personal gain. 6 months later, David received another promotion, this time to team lead. He'd proven himself not just technically, but as someone who could bring people together. His journey from exploited junior developer to respected leader became an inspiration for others. The company implemented new policies about workplace bullying and financial exploitation, directly inspired by David's experience. No employee would ever again feel pressured to spend beyond their means for team acceptance. The culture shift was permanent and meaningful. Looking at my team now, collaborating effectively and supporting each other, it was hard to believe how toxic things had become under Marcus's influence. His systematic campaign of sabotage had nearly destroyed everything we'd built, but ultimately, it had made us stronger and more united. The documentation I'd maintained for 3 years had saved not just my career, but the livelihoods of my entire team. Every interaction logged, every incident recorded, had built an unassailable wall of evidence against someone who thought himself untouchable. The corporate shark had been caught in his own net. This ending feels earned because we saw all the careful planning and proof-gathering pay off in real ways for everyone involved. Thanks for getting through the full story. Much love and hope you all have an amazing day.